Imagine taking a group of ordinary, well-adjusted young men. You give half of them power, the other half none. And in just days, the powerful become cruel, the powerless broken. This isn't fiction. It's the story most of us know about the Stanford Prison Experiment. A chilling tale, often taught as irrefutable proof that situations can turn good people evil. But what if the true lessons are far more complex? And frankly, far more disturbing? In the summer of 1971, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a Stanford psychology professor, set out to understand the psychological effects of power and powerlessness. Funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research, he recruited 24 healthy undergraduates screened for mental stability with no history of antisocial behavior. Randomly, they were assigned roles, prisoner or guard. For $15 a day, they agreed to a 2-week simulation. The setting, a mock prison, built in Stanford's psychology basement, designed to be as realistic as possible. To drive home the authenticity, the prisoners were subjected to surprise arrests by actual Palo Alto police. Imagine the shock, waking up in your own home only to be handcuffed, driven away, and booked as though you had committed a crime. They were fingerprinted, strip-searched, stripped of their identities, a deliberate act of dehumanization. They were given numbers instead of names, dressed in smocks and nylon caps, and even fitted with ankle chains. Their individuality began to erode before the experiment even truly began. Meanwhile, the guards arrived clad in uniforms, reflective sunglasses obscuring their eyes, and wielding the authority to maintain order, explicitly instructed to avoid physical violence but given free rein to impose psychological control. With roles firmly established, the initial interactions unfolded within the confines of the simulated prison. The experiment was designed as a deep dive into the human psyche under extreme conditions. The question hung in the air: what happens when ordinary individuals are placed in such a powerful, asymmetrical environment? What happened next became legend. Within days, the guards embraced their roles with chilling speed. They transformed into authoritarian, abusive, even sadistic figures, shocking the researchers and themselves. They used sleep deprivation, forcing prisoners into arbitrary counts in the dead of night. Humiliation and psychological torment became daily routines, designed explicitly to break spirits. The prisoners, meanwhile, showed profound distress, crying, cowering, clutching at the remnants of their fading identities. Emotional breakdowns and panic attacks became alarmingly common. So severe was the psychological strain that half of the prisoners had to be released early. Zimbardo himself, acting as the superintendent, observed the rapid deterioration and, within 6 days, called an abrupt end. A study planned for 2 weeks was over in less than 1. His stark conclusion? The power of the situation was paramount. It overrode individual personalities, transforming good people into oppressors and victims alike. The prison environment itself, he argued, was the crucible for this swift transformation. For decades, this was accepted truth, a powerful, undeniable lesson about the susceptibility of human nature to oppressive environments. But the story of the Stanford Prison Experiment is not as simple as that. Over the decades, a growing chorus of critics, armed with newly unearthed archival materials and participant testimonies, has begun to dismantle the very foundations of Zimbardo's iconic study. First, there were the ethical breaches. Participants weren't truly informed of the extreme risks. The surprise arrests at their homes alone should have raised red flags. Zimbardo himself later admitted that the unpredictable nature of the experiment made true informed consent impossible, a significant ethical lapse. The psychological harm was undeniable: panic attacks, breakdowns, trauma. The well-being of the participants was severely compromised. Perhaps most damning, participants were effectively denied their fundamental right to withdraw. Prisoners who asked to leave were told they couldn't. They genuinely believed they were trapped. One even resorted to faking distress just to escape the simulation. Then there was the systematic sleep deprivation. Guards woke prisoners for arbitrary counts in the dead of night. A former guard even called it an internationally recognized torture technique under the Geneva Convention. This wasn't just discomfort, it was deliberate psychological torment, inflicted by the very design of the study. These ethical breaches alone raise serious questions about the validity and moral standing of the experiment. They serve as a stark reminder of the paramount importance of safeguarding human subjects in psychological research. Beyond ethics, methodological flaws cast a long, dark shadow over Zimbardo's claims. Critics argue that participants, especially the guards, were not spontaneously transforming, but were instead exhibiting demand characteristics. In other words, they behaved in ways they believed the researchers expected, essentially playing a part for the experiment. Take David Eschliman, the infamous John Wayne guard, who later confessed to play acting and hamming it up, consciously imitating film characters. Other guards expressed discomfort. seeing the dehumanization as a construct of the experiment, rather than their own innate behavior. There was no control group, so how could Zimbardo definitively claim that the prison environment alone caused these behaviors? Then there's the troubling selection bias. While Zimbardo claimed participants were normal, later research proved otherwise. Carnahan and McFarland in 2007 found that volunteers for a prison study already scored higher on traits like aggression, authoritarianism, and Machiavellianism, and crucially, lower on empathy. This fundamentally undermines the idea that normal people were transformed. Instead, it suggests that predisposed individuals were primed to behave harshly. Perhaps most critically, Zimbardo's claims of systematic record-keeping have been debunked. Archival materials reveal incomplete data, no records for an entire day, less than 10% of the experiment recorded, and even those recordings were unrepresentative. Zimbardo himself admitted to selective sampling, curating a narrative rather than allowing the data to speak for itself. These methodological flaws collectively cast serious doubt on the scientific validity of the Stanford Prison Experiment's conclusions. This brings us to the most unsettling revelation: Zimbardo's own profound influence. He wasn't just the lead researcher, he was the prison superintendent, actively involved in the simulation and thereby blurring any sense of objectivity. This dual role created a massive conflict of interest, prioritizing the study's continuation over participant well-being. Contrary to the popular belief that guard behavior emerged spontaneously, archival materials show explicit, precise instructions given by Zimbardo and his assistants. They told guards to create feelings of boredom, a sense of fear, create a notion of arbitrariness, take away their individuality. In general, what all this leads to is a sense of powerlessness. Guards were coached to play the part of a tough guard and told that the experiment's success depended on their behavior. This wasn't a natural role adoption. It was a directed performance. The bad barrel wasn't merely observed. It was meticulously engineered. Critics allege Zimbardo engaged in selective reporting, highlighting only the most dramatic moments and omitting instances where guards were kind. One guard even claimed Zimbardo kept participant names secret for decades, not to protect their privacy but to maintain control over the narrative. Ultimately, Zimbardo's emotional investment in proving his hypothesis led him to actively influence behavior and delay, halting the experiment, compromising its scientific integrity, and turning a supposed experiment into a directed demonstration. Yet, perhaps the most powerful critiques come from the participants themselves. Their voices shed new light on the entire operation. David Eschliman, the John Wayne guard, explicitly stated that he was an actor and hamming it up. Another guard, John Mark, denied observing any mob mentality, insisting individuals acted on their own terms, treating the experiment like a job. And the prisoners? Archival materials and testimonies reveal most were never fully immersed. They remained acutely aware they were part of an experiment. The pasteboard decor, office noises, questionnaires, and visits from journalists were constant reminders of the artificiality. Prisoners like Stuart Levin and Doug Corpy explicitly stated, "We all knew it was an experiment," and that they were merely playing a role. Still, despite this awareness, they felt genuinely trapped. They believed they couldn't leave. This perception was reinforced by Zimbardo's denial of early release requests, leading to real psychological distress. Compliance became a strategy for survival rather than a natural adoption of the prisoner role. The post-experiment debriefing was itself controversial. No full group debriefing occurred. Instead, guards met separately and were encouraged to say bad things about the prisoners, actively fostering animosity. One guard discovered the deceit of a one-way mirror during debriefing, a shocking revelation. He interpreted it as a deliberate tactic to pit us against one another, further eroding trust and objectivity. In science, replicability is everything. Independent researchers must be able to reproduce findings to consider them reliable. And here, the Stanford Prison Experiment faces its most significant challenge. Its findings have never been rigorously replicated. The most notable attempt was the BBC prison study in 2002, led by Alex Haslam and Stephen Riker. Crucially, Haslam and Riker did not assume leadership roles or guide the guards, unlike Zimbardo. The results were dramatically different. Prisoners formed cohesive groups and successfully challenged guard authority. Guards did not uniformly adopt cruel behaviors, leading to a more egalitarian system. They concluded that people do not automatically assume roles that are given to them in the manner suggested by the role account that is typically used to explain events in the SPE. A direct challenge to Zimbardo's core claim that oppressive behavior emerged spontaneously from the environment. Instead, it suggests Zimbardo's direct guidance and demand characteristics were the true drivers of the experiment's outcome, not spontaneous role adoption. The inability to replicate these findings fundamentally undermines the SPE's claims about universal human behavior. And today, a direct replication is virtually impossible due to modern ethical standards. The harm caused would never be approved. Furthermore, the social and cultural context of 1971 is vastly different from today, making a true replication unfeasible. The critical reevaluation of the SPE, alongside other social psychology classics, has led to a profound shift in understanding. It challenges the simplistic banality of evil thesis that individuals passively conform to malevolent instructions. In the SPE, not all guards acted brutally. Those who did often showed ingenuity and initiative. This suggests tyranny didn't stem from leaden conformity, but from the active engagement of enthusiasts, implying a greater degree of individual agency. The BBC prison study showed that group identity could empower resistance. Prisoners united, challenged authority, and even established a more egalitarian system. Tyranny emerged not from passive conformity, but when a subgroup actively identified with and imposed a draconian hierarchy, led by true believers. Similarly, reevaluating Milgram's obedience studies shows it wasn't just blind obedience. Participants experienced anguish and often tried to argue their way out. They complied only when actions were justified in terms of scientific benefits, but direct orders were frequently refused. Compliance in both studies was linked to a sense of commitment and identification with the experimenter or the scientific goals. The deeper lesson, when critically reevaluated, is this: tyranny flourishes not from blind conformity, but when perpetrators actively identify with and justify oppressive systems, often executing vicious acts with ingenuity because they believe in the system or its stated goals. It's a more complex, unsettling truth about human nature. Philip Zimbardo's work post-SPE has largely focused on the question, why do good people do evil things? This culminated in his book, The Lucifer Effect, where he famously applied his situational perspective to the Abu Ghraib abuses, arguing the servicemen were good apples corrupted by a bad barrel, the system. He also explored heroism, leading to his Heroic Imagination project. To his credit, Zimbardo has acknowledged significant ethical failures of the SPE, admitting his dual role was a serious conflict of interest and that he should have ended the experiment earlier. These are important admissions for the scientific record. However, he and his supporters continue to defend certain core findings, arguing for the study's ecological validity and the insights it provided. This highlights a nuanced aspect of scientific self-correction. It's hard for original researchers to fully disengage from their initial hypotheses. Yet the ongoing controversies and critical reevaluations of the SPE exemplify the vital process of science correcting itself. Widely accepted ideas must be re-examined and, when warranted by new evidence, overturned. This continuous scrutiny is essential for scientific progress, ensuring our understanding evolves with new insights. The Stanford Prison Experiment remains famous, but its legacy has transformed. It's now a complex case study of methodological flaws, ethical breaches, and profound experimenter influence. The unknowns we've explored, the explicit instructions to guards, conscious role-playing, selection bias, denial of withdrawal, failed replications, and the reinterpretation of conformity as engaged followership, collectively dismantle the simplistic narrative we once accepted. Ironically, the SPE may now serve as a more potent illustration of the dangers of experimenter bias and the critical importance of unwavering ethical oversight rather than of the inherent brutality of human nature. Its journey from accepted truth to contested cautionary tale is a powerful testament to the dynamic nature of scientific understanding and a reminder that human behavior is never simple. At Beyond Questions Plus, deep self-understanding sparks true change. Tell us, when did you feel unstoppable and how did you honor your conscience? Subscribe, hit the bell, and share.